question was, what was my treasure? Now, the thing is, and Joseph Campbell says this himself, the hero's journey is not something that you do once and it's finished. Just like, personally, I don't believe that someone follows the path of enlightenment and then, boom, they're finished. If someone's still here on earth, they have something to learn. Now, you could say that there are some people who are enlightened teachers who opt to stay incarnate, and that's possible. But if they're still here, there's something that their soul is gaining from that experience, something it's learning. And so, truthfully, I don't believe that anybody here on earth is 100% ascended or enlightened. They're still here for a reason. And I don't think that after we manage to reach those higher levels and have the option to leave the school of earth, as I like to call it, that we are finished learning, that we go off and we're finished. Nor do I think that our higher selves knows everything. In fact, I see our higher selves as being more juvenile in nature, then that's why we came here to this accelerated school, to learn as quickly as we can, to help with the rest of creation. But that's my personal philosophy after reading several near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, having my own out-of-body experiences, having my own past life regression. And I had some interesting past lives. Perhaps if someone asks about those, I'll share them in another video. But what happens is that life is a spiral. And we have contracts where we have agreed to learn certain lessons in each life. And as life spirals back to that lesson that we have agreed to, then we have that choice. We have the choice to react like we always do as a soul, or we have a choice to react differently. And I personally believe that not only do we have conditioning from this life, from our parents and society and culture, but we also have conditioning from past lives that play into how we react and behave here. One of the hero's journeys that I went through was earning my college degrees, and one of those is a bachelor's in psychology. And I admit, when I finished my bachelor's in psychology, I was glad to achieve that degree, but at the same time, I was so disappointed. I thought that psychology had answers. At least answers to what I thought they had answers to. I thought they had things nicely categorized and that they could actually predict behavior. But that's not the case. They can't predict behavior. Maybe they can categorize to some point, but for the most part, the people who categorize mental illness are actually psychiatrists, which are a totally different field. It's a totally different study. That's more of the biology of the human body. They believe that chemicals give rise to consciousness as opposed to a soul or spirit. And if you think that's the case, you probably wouldn't be here studying alchemy or any of the sevens, past the sevens that I've shared, or the hero's journey, or any of this. So, psychiatry does not appeal to me on any level. Neither does the modern cognitive psychologist who thinks that our mind behaves like a computer. We invented computers, and we were inspired by our own faculties. Therefore, of course, it reflects back the creator of them. They are dependent upon us to be created. And so they are a mirror image of us, just as we are a mirror image of our creator. And so they are limited like us, because I believe that we are more limited than our creator, and that other things happened on this level of reality to make us different from most others. So each time you go on the hero's journey, you're going to earn a different treasure. I consider each of my daughters to be treasure that I earned on hero's journeys. Each of them I had to fight to end up getting pregnant and all sorts of things. That was a whole battle, and I've gone into that elsewhere. Even with my husband, he's a treasure from a hero's journey. I really had to teach myself how to think properly in order to attract someone that was everything that I wanted. In fact, the funny thing about my husband is that when I was trying to manifest someone to marry, and I wrote down an entire list. It had to over 100 attributes, 100 different things that I wanted. I'm very picky. I have some planets in Virgo and Libra. So I wrote down over 100 things that I wanted in a spouse. And then the trick with manifestation is to let go of whatever you were trying to manifest. And so I wrote down all these things, just wrote them down. And then I burnt the paper to symbolize that I released it into the universe. And when I met my husband, there were things that surprised me. I didn't think a musician was someone who could be too terribly intelligent. All the musicians I'd ever met were not so intelligent. So I was really surprised and shocked how intelligent he was. And I actually called nonsense on his profile. I met him on OkCupid. So this is an internet romance that worked. But this was back in the around 2008. So it was a different internet back then, a different generation of people who were dating. Post-COVID, I don't know how you people do that thing. But I've been with him for over 15 years now. But it started off with being kind of in a darker place and learning how to reach wholeness. When I met him, I had learned about self-actualization, and I was studying self-actualization, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization is at the top of most of the pyramids. It's not actually the top anymore. He added another one to it. And you can see that in my videos. I'll actually link the playlist below. Or at least the very first video of the playlist. And the thing is that I thought, well, I'm self-actualized. I've reached wholeness. I love myself. And the process that I used in order to reach that point where I loved myself was building myself up, because I do have an ex-husband. So I got divorced. I wasn't married to him very long. Fortunately, I just settled for him, and it's a whole story. But I divorced him and left everything I knew, left all my friends, left the life that defined me, and I was really broken by that experience. And it took me a while to find myself again. That's what my book Coffee Girls is really about. Is I found a lot of meaning in a group of girls, a sisterhood that I met while making coffee as a job. And I just lucked right into that job. It wasn't a job that I would ever have gone after, but I happened to be in the right place in the right time, and the right person walked into my life, a manager, and he's still a dear friend and someone that I absolutely adore to this day. And the job fell into my lap, and it was everything that I could want, and I ended up serving coffee a couple of times in my life, and a cumulative of 8 years. So it was a defining experience in my life. And maybe I'll end up serving coffee again if I ever go back to having a normal job after being a housewife. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to limit myself. I've learned not to. And that was, meeting my husband, just coming back from that divorce and being like, well, that was just another experience, because I took the vows so seriously and never saw myself as a divorcee or someone who would get divorced. And I quite honestly forget these days that I was married before. So it's always a surprise to even say it aloud. But so manifesting my husband that I have now, that I've been with for 15 years, was a whole hero's journey. And so I can say that I've gained treasure in increments, but by far the most potent of all the treasures that I have experienced or gained has to be a deep peace of mind that everything's going to be alright. And no matter what happens, things are going to be alright. And I think it's because my life has fallen apart so completely so many times. It did when I was a child, when my parents moved me from Bakersfield, the outskirts of Bakersfield, in an area called Rosedale, Scottsdale. Moved from that area to Orange County, California, and it was a major culture shock. And I didn't have friends for about 5 years because I just didn't fit in. I was bullied. I was dyslexic, so I was put in special education classes, and a lot of the kids in the special education classes had behavioral issues, and it was very difficult for me. I went through a lot of experiences in middle school and high school where I was the outcast. I was not the accepted person. And looking back at it, I think that's funny. And I did a video recently called Love and Belonging that I kind of covered that. And so just each level of my life, I've had things just fall apart, take a while to build up again, fall apart again, build it back up, fell apart again. And then I was just like, I'm done. I'm done building it up. I'm done trying to create this identity, this ego. And I hit that point where I was like, I don't want this ego anymore. And I just let it go. And I haven't built up an ego since then. I don't define myself but by what I do. And I don't care what people think or how they judge me. And that was a major victory on the path, the hero's journey. But it doesn't compare to that deep sense of peace, of knowingness that things are going to be all right that I have. And that came about because I realized that everything falls apart. It goes back to that book by Pema that everything falls apart. And it always comes back together. It always ends up being something new. If you're meant to be here, you'll continue to be here, no matter what, because you have certain life lessons. And it's just like with astrology. People ask, is there free will or is there predestination? And I don't care if there is either. I believe there's a combination. I believe that there is predestination, and it's a loose predestination. It's like, we know there's these, 12 paths that your life could go on when you incarnate into this life as the person you chose to be. And you have the free will to choose between those paths at any time. And so there is predestination, but there is also free will because you can choose which ones that you want. And all of them exist until you make the choices. And then those choices become cemented into your life. And that becomes your history. And that becomes a part of what defines you because it's your experiences. I go into a lot of that detail in my book, The Purpose of Life, a scientific and magical handbook for the age of Aquarius. So I wanted to share that it was in increments that I ended up gaining this peaceful state of mind that I consider to be the ultimate treasure of the hero's journey that I've been on so far, which I would call simply my life. And that peacefulness comes up anytime I have a moment of anxiety. Now, I did go through a time after my daughter died of PTSD and anxiety attacks, and I don't have that anymore, just like I don't have depression. And recently, I think I'm going through hormonal things, which probably has to do with the fact that I was sterilized after my second daughter. It was like, I don't want any mistakes. And so I was like, nope, not having any more kids. Because I reached 40. And at 40, I was like, I don't want to have kids after 40. And my husband is 7 years older than me. So he didn't want children after his age either. So we decided that I would get sterilized. And so I'm probably dealing with some hormonal issues. And the other day, I realized I was just in this horrible funk. And it lasted about 2 or 3 days. But I actually caught myself thinking the way that I used to think when I was depressed and going through PTSD and anxiety and all that stuff. And I was like, why am I thinking this way? This is so weird. I love my life. I love everything about my life. I've manifested everything that I've ever wanted and more. A lot more than I ever wanted. And I am like supremely happy. So why am I in this really strange funk and having these strange thoughts? And I realized these were the thoughts that I used to have all the time. These were the thoughts I had all the time as a teenager. And even as an adult, I would go, oh, I hate my life. Oh, I hate how this is. Oh, this person's holding me back. Oh, it's their fault. It's no one's fault but my own. The only person who can hold me back is myself. And I know that for a fact. And that's how I have achieved all the things I've done. I couldn't have earned my college degrees if I just believed in someone else's word that I could never graduate college because I'm dyslexic. I have 3 degrees proving those teachers wrong, but they had the guts to tell me at that point that I would never, ever earn a degree from college. And I just worked really hard and learned how to compensate for my disability. And I've learned that time and time again. The only person responsible for my thoughts and my ability to achieve something is me. I decided to write my book, The Purpose of Life. In about 4 months, I wrote it, I published it, and it's out there. It wasn't anything that, everything fell into line to where I could publish it easily and get it out there. And that was all me. I could have stopped and said, oh, I need to do it the traditional way. I need to do this. I need to do that. And that's just not my personality anymore. To say, oh, it's, woe is me, I can't do this. Or to talk about it and not actually do it. I have managed to put my mind to several things that I wanted to achieve, and I've achieved all of them. In fact, most recently, when my eldest daughter was born a few years ago, just 4 years ago, I decided to play with manifestation a little bit more since I'm at home. And it is easier if you have more time and you're not wrapped up in work. Work does cause a lot of drama and you're in a totally different mindset. And it took me a few years to kind of get off of the mindset of work and really slow down and really examine my thoughts. And I decided at this point, I was no longer had the panic attacks and no longer had the anxiety, and I was in a very, very different place. And I was like, I had heard that someone liked to collect feathers. That every time they saw a feather, it was like a message from heaven. And I'm like, oh, that would be really nice to manifest feathers. And so I kind of wrote it down in a journal, and I kind of forgot about it. And I had the opportunity to buy some turkey feathers, and I think these are quail feathers. And the next thing I know, I was finding feathers everywhere. So these additional feathers are ones that I actually found around the neighborhood. Every time I went out, I found more feathers to where I could make a giant smudge fan, because I really wanted to make a giant smudge fan. And it got to the point where I was so sick of finding feathers. The very last feather that I actually found and collected was this hawk's feather. And it was during that period of time. And I was like, wow, I manifested all these crazy feathers. I mean, this is after manifesting my daughter, which, again, I was told couldn't happen. Manifesting my degrees, which were a little bit harder because back then I didn't believe any of the woo-woo stuff. And it really has been, as I've walked along the path, that I've believed more and more in it. And if it wasn't for ASMR Reiki and like frequency music, my pregnancies would have been so much harder because I had to go on bed rest, and it was difficult being on bed rest. So I learned that frequency music definitely works for me, and that ASMR Reiki and crystal healing definitely works for me. And that's what inspired me to get into those myself, and I walked that path. And so, like I said, I manifested all these feathers. And since then, I've mostly recently, kind of to occupy my time, I've been manifesting 4-leaf clovers constantly. Almost every day I find a new 4-leaf clover. And that's supposed to be, and I've shown my husband, taken pictures of them and sent my parents. I've posted a picture on here. And that's supposed to be a 1 in 10,000 chance. And I think I found a 5-leaf clover one day, and that's like a 1 in like a million chance or something. It's really bizarre. Then I can manifest that so easily. Now, as far as money's concerned, I haven't really tried to manifest money. I've never really had a poverty mindset, so that's something that I haven't tried to do. But because I've always been able to find the money to do what I want when I want. And that's what manifestation to me is all about, is doing what you want when you want to. And I've been very lucky that I have the house, have the kids, have the husband, have the cars, all the things. All the things ended up coming to me, even though at one point I was like, I don't need them. And it's probably because I hit the point where I was like, I don't need them, that they came to me. And even now, if I were to lose all the things, I know I would be okay, because people survive. It's amazing what people can survive, what you can adapt to. And it is in some ways kind of sad that some people have adapted to and become used to and prefer what others consider horrible circumstances. But again, that's free will, and that has to do with what I consider pre-life choices that people made. And I, as an empath, had to learn that. And it's interesting because that was part of my journey too. I was in the first group that ever started talking about being an empath. And I remember the woman who was in charge of the group on Facebook, who first started talking about being an empath. She went off and made a different Facebook page and group for chakras, because things happened and people started saying things like, oh, I told my best friend's husband that he needed to change because I'm an empath and he's affecting the way my mood and the way I'm doing things. And it was like, no, that's not how you want to be. It's okay if you can read energy. It's okay if you can pick up on other people's emotions. But you can't change other people. You can't force your will onto other people or say, I'm an empath, therefore I'm a victim and you have to change. And that started happening a lot in that group. And I left that group about that time because I was not interested in seeing that happen. And not long after, I quit Facebook altogether. And part of my path back in 2005 was I quit watching the news. I do watch some news now called Breaking Points, but that's rare. I just kind of scan the headlines. But it's just better off not watching. And I stopped listening to music sometime, I'd say around 2012, 2013. I stopped listening to most music. I do listen to some music still, a couple of my favorite bands, but for the most part, I'm very careful of whose energy that I come in contact with. And I prefer frequency music. I prefer music with no words because there's no conditioning involved. And it's amazing how much we absorb from other people and have no idea. It is so much subconscious conditioning, and because everybody thinks that everybody else feels that way and we can relate, we think it's normal. And we're just kind of like infecting each other with this frequency that isn't that high, I guess you could say. And I've just come to the point where I'm only really interested in people who are capable of being at that higher frequency. And there's not a lot of them out there, but there's enough that I can find them on YouTube and watch them and listen to things that I actually find interesting. And unfortunately, it's not the news. It's not all the bad news the world over. It is actually things that I share here on my own channel. I love listening to people talk about alchemy. I love listening to people talk about, manifestation. And that's what I actually enjoy the most. And it's really fun to watch the awakening occur. And having started out, in the 90s with the books, The Celestine Prophecy, and then, 2005, 2008, I was learning all about 2012. But when 2012 came about, I was not a part of the spiritual community. I think the people who were ready to ascend to a different planet are pretty entertaining. I didn't come to Dolores Cannon until way after everybody else. So I didn't know about the alternate split earth theory thing that everybody else was talking about at that time. 2012 was one of the best years of my life, and we're actually coming into a period of time with the North Node changing into Aries, into a time that's very much like 2012 and 2000. And for me, both of those were graduations. In 2012, I celebrated my 30th birthday, and I also celebrated earning my bachelor's degree in psychology. And of course, in 2000, I actually graduated from college, or high school back then, not college. So I graduated from high school, and then I graduated in college with Aries North Node. So I don't know what the graduation is going to be this year, but it should be very interesting, especially with Jupiter in Taurus. I've really already enjoyed the energy as a double Capricorn. And it's very funny to know, not only am I sensitive to the energies of other people, but that I'm sensitive to the energy of astrology. And I think the increment that really helped me the most was the moment I realized that that energy existed, and I decided to align my will with that higher power. And instead of resisting the energy, I decided to learn from it. So when a transit is coming up that is supposed to be negative, something squares one of my planets, I'm like, okay, what can I possibly learn from this? What is the good thing about this happening? What decision can I make that's going to be different from the decisions I made before? Or like the current transit, where I know that the North Node is going into Aries, where I always have wonderful things happen. Well, I know that I'm going to have a wonderful year. And even if that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that's okay. And that was another big part of learning psychology, was I learned that self-fulfilling prophecies are a real thing, and conditioning is a real thing, and that you can bring that subconscious conditioning into your consciousness and transmute it into success. And that's how you manifest. And it's proven. Self-fulfilling prophecies are absolutely proven by science and psychology. And conditioning is absolutely proven by the science of psychology. That was actually accidentally done by Pavlov and his dogs. And then it became a bigger psychology experiment. But it's absolutely real. Conditioning is real. Self-fulfilling prophecy is real. And you can use the self-fulfilling prophecy, as I did with my husband, where I wrote 100 different things that I wanted and then released it. I knew I was looking for those things on a subconscious level. I planted that seed in my subconscious, and I was able to manifest it in the world. And that's what you can do with intentions. And because we are part of a collective, we have a collective subconscious, when you work with the energies that are being moved by the universal energies of astrology, by setting your intention in the new moon and being grateful for what you have on the full moon, you amp up the ability to use that self-fulfilling prophecy and that conscious conditioning that you're doing of yourself, because the energy of the collective actually supports it, because that's the way things have been done since millennia. You are actually acting within a self-fulfilling prophecy that has been, I guess you could say, you've even inherited in your ancestral DNA. And I've seen that work. Like I said, manifested tons of feathers, manifested 4-leaf clovers, and you could say I manifested my husband, even my kids, to some degree my house, and here I am living the life. And I can say that I live a wonderful life. And you might be asking, well, then why are you here on YouTube? And quite frankly, it's because I continue to have a mind that still asks questions and seeks experiences. And that is the curiosity that remains. Where a lot of the ego mask has fallen away and all of that, what remains now for me is a curiosity. And YouTube hit 1,000 subscribers, which is something that I said on my blog I'd come back at 1,000 subscribers, and that piqued my interest, and so here I am, and I'm answering questions. So that is a long way of saying that my greatest treasure is this peace of mind that I've gained, that I have tested, that I've seen work, and that I know no matter what happens, things will work out. I'll survive. There will be another high point. There may be another low point. The low points do get less low the further you go. But, I've stood on that mountain. And I guess you could say in a lot of ways I still am standing on that mountain. I personally feel I've been at a spiritual plateau for quite a while. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go from here. I do intend to write the book, The Seven Code, which will be 7 systems of 7 from around the world that, in my mind, as far as I'm concerned, prove that all systems are the same system, that we have been given this system from antiquity that teaches us the path to wholeness. And all the information is out there now to go out and learn it and evolve. And our consciousness is evolving as a result, because there is a critical mass that has become interested in that. And I am just part of that collective that is doing that. So that is my greatest treasure, is a peace of mind, a rock steady knowingness, which was my goal when I first started out in the 90s and I read the words of Jesus saying that he had secret teachings that he taught the disciples that he didn't teach the people. He taught the people in parables because he didn't think they would comprehend the bigger concepts. And my question was, where did those concepts go? Did they survive? And I absolutely believe that they did survive. And I absolutely believe that they were hermetic in nature. And I believe that the alchemists are some of the people who were given those truths that continue to carry those truths down to our ages. And that this is the age where those secrets are meant to be released to the public, because people have come of age. Humanity has come of age spiritually. And that's why these systems are here and they can be synchronized and we can work with them. So again, that's my personal philosophy, and I am working on the 7 Code book. Personally, I'm taking my time on it because I want to explore everything in full before I commit it all to paper. And it will be kind of a brief overview, like the purpose of life is. The purpose of life contains more of my psychology that I've learned, and the manifestation information, and the reason why we suffer. And the 7 Code will be more about the answers that antiquity and our ancestors have passed down to us. I do believe that we had instructors either after a cataclysmic asteroid hit and destroyed Atlantis and Lemuria, or just in general to help humanity to learn how to do the agricultural age, because the agricultural age comes out of nowhere, and they don't have explanation for things. They don't have an explanation for why there's Neanderthals and modern humans that were together, which created me, because I'm a descendant of both, or why the Denisovians existed at all. They don't have any real knowledge of the Denisovians at all, and I'm a descendant of those as well. So previously they didn't have any idea that there was anything but modern humans that survived. They thought it was survival of the fittest, and Neanderthals had been eliminated, and they had no idea about Denisovians, and until they started looking at DNA, they didn't know that either species survived. and we're compatible with humans. That's not supposed to happen in nature. And so we have a lot of mystery still on Earth. And I think we're at that age, that time, that maturity as a civilization where we're going to start discovering the answers. And I'm very excited that AI is a thing that's taking off finally. We've been hearing about the singularity for so long and everything that I'm curious to see what happens. And personally, that's what keeps me going. I have this deep inner knowingness and this peace and calm because I know that I'm an eternal being having a very temporary human experience, and that everything is temporary, that anything could be taken away from you in an instant, and that you will survive it, and that I have survived it many times to the point where I don't try to rebuild it or reclaim it or chase after things that are not mine. And we've reached that maturity where we're going to have all these answers come to the forefront. And of course it looks darkest right now because we're at that point where the dawn is happening. And it's always darkest before the dawn. And it wasn't very dark in 2012. I think people are in more of a darker mood nowadays than they ever were in 2012. And I think people are starting to be a little bit sick of the awakening. Like, when is it going to happen? And it is going to be gradual. And there is a new crop that is awakening. And it is very exciting. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. That peaceful mind, that knowingness, that you can attain that you can reach that point. Meditation did help. I didn't really mention that, but learning to meditate was a huge part of my journey. And meditation just means to place your mind upon. It doesn't mean that you have to be in the lotus position and have no thoughts. Although that does happen, and it can happen, and it does happen with practice. But until then, just walking meditations. Until then, journaling and just draining your mind of all the thoughts onto a piece of paper. That works fine. And the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you condition yourself consciously.